This is the Yamaha FZ8, or as some people call it, the Phaser 8, which I think sounds stupid. Now it's called the FZ8 because it's around roughly 800 cc's, 779 cc's to be exact. And the engine was derived off of the FZ1 motor, where it just has the same stroke, smaller bore, lighter crankshaft, and smaller valves. Now, if you're getting all confused with all the different FZs, you got the 6, you got the 7, you got the 8, you got the 9, you got the 1, and then they got another one. It is kind of confusing. Let me explain it to you right now. The original, the FZ1, was an inline 4-cylinder, about 1,000 cc's. And then you had the FZ8, this one, which is 800 cc's, also an inline 4-cylinder. Then you have the FZ07, which is an inline twin, and then you have the FZ9, or also the MT09, which is the inline triple. All right, you got it? Good. Now, I've always been a big fan of the FZ07. I just love them. Every time we get them in, I keep them around for a while. I ride them. I like to ride them personally. The couple problems with the FZ07 was how it looked and how it's kind of, I didn't think it was that stable at the higher speeds. Now, to compare that to the FZ08, in a lot of ways they're very similar, but in other ways they're very different. The ways that they're very different is torque. This has 70 foot-pounds of torque. The FZ07 has 45. Not quite double, and this only weighs about 60 pounds more than the FZ07. This has 91 horsepower. The FZ07 has 75 horsepower. It's 15 more horsepower. So what's going to happen is 0 to 60 between these two bikes is going to be very similar. The quarter mile, this one's going to start pulling away, and anything past that, this is going to just start destroying it. This is your basic naked street fighter bike. Comfortable, good ergonomics. You feel real nice and snug in here. Dirt bike handlebars, which is a little bit higher. And it is just a comfortable bike. And honestly, I think it's better looking than the FZ07. Even though I love the FZ07, I cannot wait to ride this. It, of course, is water cooled and also chain drive. Now, we could talk about specs and things like that all day long. I got to ride this bike. I can't wait to see what it feels like. Once I ride it, I'll have a lot more information about it, of just the characteristics of it and how it compares with the other bikes and around it. Let's take it for a spin. All right, guys, before we do the test drive, let's do the words of wisdom. James 1:1-3. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that testing of your faith produces endurance. I like that verse. Guys, I can't wait to take this thing for a spin. Hey, you know what? We get this question all the time. People are always like, hey, did you have shirts? And we do have shirts. We have all that stuff. We have shirts and we have gloves, of course, the M1 Moto gloves. But we have a lot of M1 Srkcycles and Bikes and Beards gear on bikesandbeardsgear.com. Check that out. Bikesandbeardsgear.com. That's where you get the stuff. We're also getting some new designs coming out right now. Now, I know what you guys are wondering. You're like, yo, well, Sean, all right, what's with that horrible phone mount? And you're right, it is horrible. First of all, it just buzzes. It's just buzzing while it's sitting there. It's not a rock form phone mount. It was on the bike. I actually tried using it. It took me too long. I'm gonna take it off, of course. But if you guys are looking for a good phone mount, check out Rockform. And promo code Srkcycles25 for 25% off your next order. It really is an awesome. Oh, these brakes feel nice. I like that. All right, so you guys know I'm very familiar. Wow, this is just a. So as far as I can tell, as of right now, this bike is set up much more. The power and the feel of it is much more similar to what you would get from like a 600 Super Sport. It moves well at the low RPMs, but it doesn't like crush it. And I could see how if you were racing an FZ07, he'd probably beat you until you get past like 80 miles an hour, and then this thing would just fly past it. Very, very, very nimble feeling. I like that. It's a fairly high revving engine at 11,500 RPMs. And of course, these mirrors almost serve very little value. Great way to see your elbows or your shoulder. You gotta kind of tuck your arm in to actually use them. But that's just kind of most motorcycles. Up here, let's see if we can lay into it a little bit. There we go. It's about at 6,000 RPMs where this bike just wakes up. Where in comparison, the FZ07 has all of its power, you know, like the lower RPM, just it's a very linear power. The FZ07, it feels like it always has a big punching power, but then after, honestly, around like 80 miles an hour, you just feel like you kind of ran out, because they pack all their power into a very short range gearbox, whereas this has a much wider range, and it's going to feel a whole lot more comfortable doing much higher speeds. So unlike the FZ07, which I think would be I mean, I love the bike. I love riding it around town. I love going home with it. I love, you know, just popping wheelies in third gear at 3,000 RPMs and all these cool things. But it would be a horrible track bike. It'd be a horrible second bike, or for a track backup bike or something like that. It would just be the worst, because, like I said, the way the gearing is set up, the way the power is, you know, and that's why you have a bike that has less power, significantly less power, but can keep up at different speeds, at different RPMs. I wish this thing had a gear indicator. That'd be nice. All right, guys, let's do 0 to 60. I'm gonna imagine that the way this thing is set up, its first gear is gonna take me right to 60, but we're gonna find out right now. There. I could have done better. I definitely could have done better if I'd done it a couple more times, got used to it. I probably should have, honestly, I probably should have dumped the clutch at like 8,000 RPMs. This bike, just a world of difference of stability on the highway. I don't know why. And normal highway speeds, the FZ07 was great, I loved it. But when you started pushing those limits closer to track speeds, nothing that you would ever actually do on the road, but you know, on the track, just didn't feel as stable as like a super sport. But this bike feels awesome. I'm really enjoying riding this bike. But the characteristics are much more, it's very clear from riding it. It's very clear that this has such similarities to the FZ1. And it's much more closer to its super sport brother than its twin cylinder red-headed stepchild, whom I also love. The cool thing about these bikes is you can find them for pretty cheap. Brand new, they were cheap. They're brand new, they were like 8,600 bucks, which is incredibly cheap. I think the FZ07s are like 7,400 bucks. But even used, you know, you can find these things in the $5,000 range, which is a lot of motorcycle. I would recommend a bike like this over a super sport. Even though it's bigger, even though it's more powerful, it's definitely a lot more planted than the FZ7. The FZ7, first gear, you floor it, front end comes up. Second gear, you floor it, front end comes up. And depending on what you're doing in third gear, if you clutch it, it'll pop up, which I personally love. I like that. I like that you can just easily pop it up and in the lower speeds of the lower gears, no problem. But this thing's much more, because the way the gears are stretched out, it's much more stable. And that front, it's easy. It's easy. You have to try really hard to get that front end to come up. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That wraps it up.